Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Penzer, former WCW and Impact ring announcer, and you are listening to Count It Out with Mike and Tyler.
Take a walk around the world and keep your hands to yourself. To the point, 'cause you know I won't be listening long.
Well, we are live, pals, and welcome to another edition of the Bill Apter Sealed of Approved Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. My name is Tyler. I am joined as always by my good friend Mike. But today, Mike, we are not alone, and I am so excited for this one. We are joined by somebody who is a huge inspiration to me on a personal level, and I think a true legend of this business. He is the author of a fantastic book called Body Slams, Memoirs of a Wrestling Pitchman. We are joined by the world's most dangerous ring announcer, Gary Michael Cappetta. Mr. Capetta, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey guys, let's just back up a second. What was that about Bill Apter? What did you say?
Yes, so about a year and a half ago, we were very fortunate to have the legendary Bill Apter join us on our show, and he had a great time with us, and he asked us if he could give us the Bill Apter seal of approval, which we very proudly wear as a badge of honor. So he gave us a little Bill Apter sticker that gave us the approval. He claims that only our show and Ricky Morton's show have it, and I don't know about that, but we're very honored either way about it. So I make sure to let everybody know.
He didn't sing for you, did he?
We tried.
Yeah, we
You
tried hard to
tried?
get him to.
Oh,
Yes.
no. I can't
We
believe
got
he
him.
wanted it.
We got him talking about his karaoke experience, and we were this close to getting him to sing "My Way."
Oh, okay.
All right. So, Mr. Capetta, there is so much stuff that I want to talk to you about today. But I want to talk about something. I'm not even too sure if you're aware that this happened or not, but just last night, there was a Impact Wrestling taping here in Toronto, where we're from, and somebody who you're very familiar with, and I believe you were kind of in a mentor role with, Mr. David Penzer. He's finished up with Impact Wrestling. I'm not too sure if he's announced his official retirement yet, but he kind of had a little bit of a send-off last night with the company. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about David Penzer and the work that you guys did together.
Sure. I'm not aware of what happened last night. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Yeah, David is he's a terrific guy. Very easygoing kind of guy. He's the kind of guy that you'd really want working on your team. Because he would, go out of his way to help whoever needed, his assistance. Last time I saw David was in June in Tampa, Florida, at a convention that he was running, and we got an opportunity to catch up. So, you're saying that last night he retired? Is that what we're saying? That he retired from announcing?
He finished up with Impact. That's all we know for sure. Scott D'Amore brought him out and announced that he was done with Impact. As far as retiring from wrestling, that has yet to be seen. But we do know he's done with Impact completely now.
So then it's very possible that he may pop up with another promotion.
Very possible.
Oh, good. Well, I always wish David the best, and I know that he's also involved in real estate in the state of Florida, so he balances a few different things. Yeah, he's terrific. He took over when I left WCW, and yeah, we've always had a really good relationship.
Now, I want to go straight to what we call the reason for the season. We're getting really close to the end of the year here, and we're preparing for our end of the year show. And one of the items we're going to be talking about at the end of the year show is something that one of the reasons I wanted you on this show. Talking to you off camera, I know you don't like to consider yourself a wrestling historian, but I've I follow you very closely on social media. You are one of the most knowledgeable people in the both in and of this business, and you've been around this business more than anybody else. So I have to ask you a question. We want to talk about the rise of Gunther in the WWE and what he's doing for the Intercontinental Championship. But from your standpoint, I was hoping you could give us your idea of the legacy of the Intercontinental Championship, because you were there for some of the very early Intercontinental Championship matches. What is it like? What's it like for you to watch that title grow from what it was to what it is now, and to see what Gunther's doing with it all these years later?
Well, it came from nowhere, right? Wasn't Pat Patterson the first?
He was.
Am
Yes,
I?
he was.
Yes, and it was from a made up tournament
Yeah.
in South America, I think. So that is my experience as an announcer, was introducing the very first Intercontinental Champion, and then a few of those, that followed. Gunther is someone like myself who's an old school wrestling fan, has to have a big smile on their face when they watch Gunther wrestle. He is and this is with the highest of compliments. He's a throwback to the big rangy kind of wrestler like Canadian Gene Kiniski.
Absolutely.
He's everything that he does in the ring has meaning, and it looks terrific. He's very serious about his about the sport, and whatever he does, it's all, you can tell it's all with the intention of presenting a reality-based confrontation. He would be someone where you would say to yourself, let's see, if I was wrestling him and I got into the ring, I wouldn't turn my back on it. I mean, his matches never come across as being any kind of a cooperative effort. It's always a tussle. It's, you always can see the resistance back and forth the way that it should be. Unfortunately, an old school wrestling fan is labeled by someone that wants to sit there and watch a 20-minute rest hold. And that is not the case. I don't want to be bored. That's boring. I want what I see in the ring to be realistic. I want there to be a reason for everything that happens in the ring, so that you can look at it. And I'm not talking simply about like quote unquote storyline. I'm talking about like physically. In other words, when somebody is seemingly decked with such force and then pops up, then that's silly. That would never happen. That undermines, it actually undermines what you, the wrestler, are trying to do. You're hurting yourself. So Gunther is he's one of the guys that's at the top of my list of the current superstars.
I think
I went on and on. I'm sorry about that.
No, absolutely. That's what we like to hear. And I think he's having an incredible run. I think he's really elevating the IC title back to the prestige that it once had. I feel like over the years it kind of got watered down a little bit, and I feel like we're getting a throwback now to that. And just this year, he surpassed to become the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time, taking over from the Honky Tonk Man. Are you surprised that we're seeing so many longer title runs in this modern era of professional wrestling? And, just seeing a run like the Honky Tonk Man's come to an end with Gunther is pretty incredible.
Let me just say that I don't think that he's just elevated. He and a few others, not just him, but he and a few others he's not just elevated the title, he's elevated the sport of pro wrestling. I'm not so concerned about length of reigns, because it's all manufactured. So I don't really see the significance of it.
I'm glad you said that, how he's upping the professional wrestling as a whole, though, because when you hear all these, especially casual fans, talk about, we're in a dark age of wrestling. Wrestling sucks now. It's not like it was in the 90s and everything. I think we're in one of the greatest eras of professional wrestling right now because of guys like Gunther and others in the business right now, because they are bringing wrestling back to what we did know even pre-90s. They're kind of bringing it back to basics and starting over and giving us something like we now have like 4 major companies, plus the indies have never been hotter. We're in one of the best states of wrestling that we've ever had. Do you watch that now? And right there's a question for you. How often do you watch pro wrestling these days?
Oh, I watch it every week. I don't necessarily watch the entire program.
Right.
3 hours is like a bit much.
Right.
Just getting back to Gunther for a second. And it's not just Gunther, because everyone who he faces, everyone who comes into the ring with him, they need to adapt.
Yeah.
He'll adapt a little bit to different styles, but I also think he's a teaching magnet. He's a wrestler who's not accustomed to his style will learn a lot by how much you can get out of seemingly doing less.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the legacy of the Intercontinental Championship, and especially during your time when you were announcing for the WWF. Were there some people that you saw carrying the title during your time there that you thought really represented it well and kind of helped build that legacy?
Yeah, I mean there was I'm just trying to remember of who the early title holders were. If you can help me out there.
Yeah, there's guys like Ken Patera, Pedro Morales, and Don Morocco really were kind of the people carrying it around that time.
Right. Well, right there you've got 3 of the best that have ever done it. All, for different reasons. They have different styles. They have different personas, from each other. You also need, I hate to bring things back down to like reality and business, but I believe one of the main reasons that it was created was to give another title. At the time, you had your world champion, your World Wrestling Federation champion. And there was the U.S. champion earlier on, who was Bobo Brazil. He always was the U.S. champion, but he didn't spend a whole lot of time in the Northeast Territory. So the Intercontinental Championship was created for there to be another singles title that could headline a smaller venue, but to be a draw. So I don't want to go down the path of being over serious about something that I think was created for a business reason. That being said, yes, it does have a legacy, but the title holders were usually chosen for business reasons.
Makes sense.
No, that's
sorry. I didn't mean to spoil the party, but
no, I love that take on it. Mike and I, we have a great dynamic on this show where I always like to look at things a little bit more on the business side because it really fascinates me, and Mike is more with his heart a little bit when we do our show. So we have some very fun conversations about that. So I love hearing the business side of it, and you look at those names like Morocco and Patera and Morales, and they're all big draws. So it makes sense to put the belt on them.
Yeah. I mean, when I was with what's now WWE for 11 years, and I did their TV for 8 of those years. and I announced some of the larger buildings, the Meadowlands in New Jersey and the Philadelphia Spectrum. And usually the world champ was in the main event, and often the Intercontinental Champion was, like the co-feature or just below it. But then I would also announce many high schools and armories and smaller venues of 1,500 people, 2,500 people, 500 people. And that's where you would see Morocco defend the Intercontinental Championship. That's where you would see Morales, who it was following his legacy of being the world's champion. But that's where those guys were the headliners. So it was plugged into what they needed depending upon the shows, the cities that were running each night, because there were at least 2 and sometimes 3 shows a night just in the one territory.
Smart business. I like that.
From the smallest local gin mill to Madison Square Garden, Philadelphia Spectrum, Boston Garden.
I'm glad you brought up your 11 years with WWE, because my next question, I'd like to know if you could tell us the major differences that maybe that you noticed moving from your 11 years with WWF throughout the golden age. You were there for the 70s and a lot of the 80s, moving from there to companies like AWA and WCW in the 80s. What were the major differences you've seen between these companies?
It was like going from ballet to street fighting. Because I mean, when Jim Crockett Promotions, I announced their monthly shows for years in Baltimore once I left WWE, and it was so hard hitting. I mean, you would never see Hogan in a hard hitting match in WWF at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't needed. I mean, it's not how it was just a different product. It's not that he couldn't, it's just that that's not what they did. So, and I was not that familiar with the Southeastern promotion. So when I saw that, it was more exciting to me. It was more, as it turned out, to be my cup of tea, but it was eye-opening and jarring and fun all at the same time. It was very different, and there was a transition. I think I hold the distinction of being the only person to work for the AWA, the NWA, and the WWF at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying just working for those promotions. Many people have done that, but and it only lasted a couple of months. But at the same time, I was a ring announcer for the events of all 3 promotions, and I'm not sure how I got away with that. I knew I was going to be leaving WWF. I didn't see a future there for myself, and I had an opportunity with Vern Gagne to be his ring announcer for his ESPN show when it came from Atlantic City when it first started. So I knew I was leaving. I was transitioning, and so I didn't really care if Vinny fired me, because I was on my way out anyway. But he didn't.
Now,
So I don't know why. And he knew he would have stooges in different arenas to report back to him.
Now, I do want to get into that a little bit in a little bit about you leaving WWE. But before we get to you leaving, I kind of want to talk about you getting in the first place. Legend has it that the person, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, please, one of the people at the very least that helped you get into this business was a good friend of yours, Gorilla Monsoon, who on this show we consider to be one of the greatest commentators, one of the greatest personalities in the history of professional wrestling. Could you please tell us about Gorilla maybe helping you get into wrestling and your friendship with him?
Yeah, it wasn't just he helped me; he put me there. He was a co-owner of WWF. So he was a minority owner, and he produced the TV shows. So he also put me on television for the very first time after I had worked with him at his local shows for a couple of years. There were, I think, 4 partners in WWF, and each partner. So remember, WWF was the Northeastern Territory in the United States, and what McMahon Sr. did was divide the territory into smaller pieces, and each of the partners promoted shows in their part of the territory. So Monsoon, he and I both lived in the same state, the state of New Jersey, and he ran the area where I lived. So he kept me working. I mean, just for local shows, I was working 3, 4 times a week, which is amazing because they were all, drives from me, not usually farther than a 3-hour drive. So yeah, I mean, he hired me to begin with, then he put me on TV, and he kept me there until he lost his partnership interest, and then he didn't have the sway to keep me going.
What was Gorilla the person like? We
That was
always hear some
wonderful.
fun stories that he liked to go out and do some gambling and was always great with the boys and being out there. Do you have any fun memories of hanging out with Gorilla?
Always. He was always like very kind. He was also like a straight shooter, and but because of his history in wrestling, he was well respected. Um, and even when he was an owner, his career was on the decline, but he continued to wrestle and was always there to help um, to help usually a villain on his way up to the world title shot. He usually had to go through Monsoon, and usually did go through Monsoon to get to like a Backlund or a superstar Billy Graham, or a Pedro Morales, at the time. Yeah, I mean, he was very generous. He and his wife Maureen were always very kind to me. He had a pool table in his house. It was like a rec room in the basement, like a refinished basement, and he would invite us over, and um, especially if there was a show in the area where he lived, and just to come on over for get something to drink, get a sandwich, and hang out for a while. Um, he was really cool. I mean, he took a personal interest in me in a business that's often very impersonal. So yeah, I mean, I love Monsoon. He's and there is the very first biography that's coming out in the spring, a Gorilla Monsoon biography.
Oh, nice.
So I interviewed for it. So I'm looking forward to to seeing how it works out. Brian Solomon is the author,
Oh, okay. Cool.
and I'm still in touch with Valerie, Monsoon's daughter,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's just a terrific family.
I would love to shift gear and talk about a legendary career that has been announced that it's going to be coming to an end next year. And one of your most famous announcements that you are known for, I'd love to talk about Sting a little bit. How crazy is it that in the year 2023, coming into 2024, that we are seeing Sting and Ric Flair together on TV in a TBS on a TBS network? Like it blows
Yeah,
my mind. I'm really enjoying seeing it.
yeah. The Stinger is always, you know, different people handle success in different ways, and some lose perspective, some get kind of full of themselves. And Sting was never like that. He was always a down to earth kind of guy. And I always, appreciated him, and he always delivered, throughout my years, all of my years with WCW, he was on top. So, I did cringe a little bit from time to time when I saw some of the things he was doing in AEW. I'm glad he's getting out of there in one piece. I don't know if I would have recommended that he jump off balconies onto tables. But who am I to say? Because he knows himself, he knows his body, he knows his motives. And he obviously, handled it okay, but that was like really a risky thing to do for little business return. He may needed to have done that kind of nutsy thing for like personal reasons. So I haven't spoken to him about it, but it's not something I would have recommended that a 61-year-old guy do. I wouldn't recommend that a 21-year-old guy do that.
Fair enough. And you've been there for some of Sting's biggest career moments, and I'd love to ask you about a couple of them and just kind of get your memories from those nights. You were the ring announcer the night that him and Ric Flair won when he won his first world championship at the Great American Bash. Do you remember anything about that night and the crowd being crazy and your announcement was spot on for it?
No, I don't. Many of the things that I've announced, I mean, you have to remember, I've announced tens of thousands of matches. And there are a few that stick out in my mind, but really just a few where I can isolate and say, yes, I remember how important, I realized how important it was at the time. And I guess sometimes there were matches that were personally important. But no, I don't recall the moment.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I just want to ask about one more moment then, because this one was a little bit different. It was the very first Halloween Havoc, the very first Halloween Havoc pay-per-view in 1989. It was the cage match with Sting.
The cage went on fire?
When the cage, that's what I wanted to ask you about. The cage got set on fire when it was coming down. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that. That was all put together by TBS theatrical department, the set designers, and they had never done anything in wrestling before, so I guess they didn't realize how hot the lights are. So when that cage came down, it was decorated for Halloween, and they obviously did not use non-flammable material, and when those decorations got close to the lights as it was being lowered, the fire started. It was, if I remember correctly, Terry Funk and Great Muta were in the ring. And I remember watching Muta jump up onto the corner turnbuckle to, did he blow it out?
I think he missed it. Yeah, I think he used the mist to blow it out.
Yes, and so it was Terry Funk, it was Muta, Flair was there. Who was the fourth guy in that?
Sting. Sting was there, and Bruno was the ref.
And Bruno was the ref. Yes, Bruno and I would go way back. Bruno was the reason I was attracted to wrestling when I was a kid. So yeah, it was always great to see him in the later years after I left WWF.
You said a phrase that you don't hear often. You said the word Sting and cringe in the same sentence earlier. Not many times you can say I cringed over something Sting did. However, I want to bring you to a night that you were there for in 1990. Can you tell us about the night that Sting was there with RoboCop and what the idea was, how Sting felt about being part of this angle? Do you remember anything about that night?
Yeah, I never spoke to Sting about it.
No.
I remember talking, early in the day, had a nice conversation with RoboCop on the steps of the DC Armory.
Was
But
it actually PC? Was it actually Peter Sellers that night, or was it just a stunt guy?
no, I think it was just a stunt guy.
Okay, that's what I assumed.
Yeah. So, but it wasn't like talking to RoboCop. I'm talking to the guy who portrays RoboCop. Um, and you know, we didn't think of it as far as I knew, and the guys that I interacted with, I didn't think of it as cringeworthy at the time that it was happening. It was just understood that now we're owned by an international organization, and they had tie-ins, with different products. And yeah, I didn't well, it wasn't too much about that sticks. Just it was just kind of weird to be sitting on the steps of the DC Armory in the afternoon of that event talking to RoboCop. It was pretty cool. Who else can say that?
You just took the words out of my mouth. Who else can say that they got to do that? That's amazing. Go ahead, Tyler.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but were you the ring announcer and there the night in Germany when Mick Foley lost his ear?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm the guy they threw the ear to. What many people don't realize about that is that it didn't all happen in Munich, Germany. That Mick's ears were hanging off of his head just by like a small piece of cartilage on each side for months. That was going on, and little by little by little, his ears were nicked. I mean, he and I were traveling together through Florida at a time when my mom lived part-time in Florida. And so we stayed at her place on one particular night. And when she looked, my mom doesn't know didn't know much of anything about wrestling. And when and he had his hair tied back. So when she looked at his ears, like they were pussy and they were raw. And I remember her cleaning his ears out with I want to say alcohol, and he was he was like squealing. First we have squeamish, right? And now we have squealing. So I want you to keep track of this because I'm going to give you a quiz at the end of your SQU words. So which is kind of funny that my mom is making this big guy squeal. Here we go. And so it didn't just happen on Munich, Germany. It's just that night in Munich, Germany, the ring ropes were too tight, so that when he put his head through the top and the center rope and vaulted himself over the top and twisted the ropes around his neck, when the referee, who was not a referee that we ever worked with before, he was a referee from France by the name of Didier Guep. He didn't know enough to pull the ropes apart to allow Mick's head to go through. They were so tight, I'm not sure that he could have anyway. So that was just the final blow. So that when he got into the ring and he took that one shot and his head went back and the ear came off, it was just the end of a very long journey for that ear. And the referee, I didn't know that was happening at the moment. I was sitting at ringside, nose to the mat, because I would give time signals to the referee. We didn't have earpieces back then, so there was no communication with the referee other than my very subtle time cues. And because you lose all sense of time when you're during a match. So he finally, I saw him go down, and his fingers were like a tweezer. He went down to the mat and I saw him pick something up, and I'm looking at it. I would never ever think that it was a human ear. And he just sort of, I don't speak French. He didn't speak English. But I did understand when he started shouting, ambulance, ambulance, ambulance.
Mhm.
So I got that. And he just sort of like flipped it to me. So it came to like sliding toward me. I looked at it. It looked like a piece of uncooked chicken fillet with white athletic tape and hair. And I picked it up. I put it in my hand. I never ever would leave ringside during a match, but now this was extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I ran back, and Ric Flair was in charge that night. And the Sportsahalle in Munich is a huge round dome kind of building, and it was very dark backstage except for a few downlights here and there. So when Flair sees me, he's in the hallway. When he sees me come back, he says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Rick, I've got Cactus's ear in my hand." He says, "What?" I said, "I've got Cactus's ear in my hand." He said, "Are you feeling all right?" Like, so I grabbed him by the arm and I pulled him under one of the downlights. And he looked down at it and he said, "Holy shit, that's an ear." I said, "It is. And we need to get it on ice so that maybe they can reattach it." And with that, some of the guys came out and they were like amazed by this. And I did find the doctor. We did put it on ice. They weren't able to reattach it. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if you came up to me and said, "Gary, I've got this human body part. Would you hold it for me?" I'd never do that. But when things happen in the
Yeah.
spur, especially to a buddy of yours, and but for anyone, I would have taken anyone's ear, at the time, if I could have helped to save it. And that's what happened. But it had that
Wow.
backstory. It had that history. It didn't all just happen in Munich, Germany.
That's a great story. That's more interesting than I could have imagined. You going by an ear falling off a man's head. That's fantastic.
Well, remember,
Um,
I was the first individual back in 2002 to start with a one-man show. So
Oh.
that's a story that I tell in my one-man show. So, I'm a cousin. And often people ask about that incident. But yeah, it's a two-act show with video and it ends with a Q&A,
Well,
but that's
hopefully,
a standard story.
hopefully you do one of those in Toronto or anywhere in Ontario, Canada, one of these days. We'll be in the front row for sure.
Cool.
Where I want to go now, as per I mentioned earlier, our year-end show is coming up, and one of the things we're going to be talking about just in a few minutes is the business decisions made by WWE and Vince McMahon in the last year. But we need some background before we get to these decisions. We need to go to your background and your history with the McMahons. Can you tell us your relationships with both Vince Sr. and Jr., and be it professional or hostile, what led to you working with either man, and what led to you leaving the company in the first place?
Well, Monsoon brought me into the organization.
That's right. Yes.
So,
but did you ever work with Senior like full on, or were you only working?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Senior, when people compare Senior and Junior, they always say, "Oh, Senior was the gentleman, and Junior, he didn't care about you." And I don't know. I think the only difference is that Senior had other guys carry out his dirty work, and Junior didn't really care what you thought about him, and he just, what you saw is what you got. I mean, ask Bruno about how Senior blacklisted him early in his career before his career got started and almost pushed him out of the business. So Senior was no, now he was came across as more gentle, and he was more gentlemanly, and he dressed, a very fine way. And if you didn't cross him, there was no problem. My favorite senior story, Vince Senior story, is I was doing their TV shows. We would tape 3 shows in a night, so we would tape them every 3 weeks. And so the first one would air the first week, then the second one the second week. So I thought I should have been getting paid more than I was. Now, this is back in the late 70s. I was getting paid probably somewhere between 40 and 60 bucks. And so that's for 3 1-hour shows. So if you put 3 into 40, I was making like $13, $14 a show. And it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I thought I should have been making more in the 100, 100 and a half range back in the 70s. So that was, I just thought that would have been fair. So I decided this one day that I was going to go in and I was going to talk to whoever would talk to me and ask for a raise. So the first guy that I went up to was Junior, and he said, I don't handle those things. Go talk to my father. So I said, well, okay. So now you have to understand that I was teaching, I was an educator.
Yeah.
And I didn't need wrestling to earn a living. So it was just a sideline for me, as opposed to everyone else and that was their living. So their living depended upon McMahon. So whether you were an opening bout guy or you were a headliner other than Bruno, you had to be really careful about what you said to him. Because if he got rid of you, you would have had to have moved your family to another part of the country if you were able to find another territory that would take you. I didn't have those kind of concerns. I wanted to continue. I loved what I was doing. And honestly, probably I was so stupid that I didn't realize that asking for a raise in the wrestling business was such an amazing, incredible, maybe even stupid thing. So in between the hours that we were taping, I went in. I'll speed my story up. I went in. And I was prepared for whatever he said. I had a comeback. I had an answer, and I said to him, Vince, this is what I make. I think I deserve more money. I was prepared for anything he was going to say, except for what he did say. Because his response to me was, sorry, but I can't afford it. So now this is the owner of the WWF, wrestling, a gazillionaire.
Yeah.
And what do you say to that? And I was speechless. And I just sort of said, oh, okay. And I turned around and I walked out because I didn't know I don't know how to respond to that. That night, at the end of the night, Phil Zacco, who was the payoff guy, came by. I always got paid in cash the night of. He came by with my envelope. He gave me the envelope. When I opened the envelope, he gave me the raise. He gave me what I asked for, but he couldn't tell me that I deserved it. That's old school thinking. The fear is, and you know what, to a certain extent, WWE is still run this way with the mentality of, well, if we put you over too much on a personal level, then you're going to start taking advantage of us. So nobody ever told me that I did a good job when I worked with them. Not once in 11 years. The idea was, well, if I'm still here, I guess I must be doing okay.
Yeah.
If they haven't fired me, then I guess I'm doing well. And every 3 weeks after that, I got the higher amount of money. So that's my favorite Vince Senior story. just so like I couldn't remember that huge match that you were talking that between Sting and Flair, but this impacted me,
Of course.
like a good 10 years before that, and certain things hit you in a certain way,
Absolutely.
and those memories like stand forever.
And what was it like, the transition moving from working for senior to working for junior?
Um, there really wasn't much of a difference. The
No.
only difference happened was when, as I said before, Monsoon lost his power.
Okay.
I didn't realize, and a year or two after I started is when Howard Finkel started, and I didn't realize at the time when it was happening that, because I now believe that Junior thought of Howard on his team and I was on Monsoon's team. I didn't realize they were different teams.
Right.
So I was never a favorite of Junior's, and I don't know why, but and it may just have been that I was brought in by Monsoon. I owed my career to Monsoon and not to him, and therefore my allegiance, my loyalty would be to Monsoon and not to him. That's the only thing I can think of.
Not that he had any reason to be, but do you feel like Vince may have been threatened by Monsoon at all?
Um, Honestly, I don't know, because you'd have to go behind the curtains and be in on the meeting of the partners, and I really don't know what the dynamic was. I know
Right.
everything was very cordial in front of me, but that's just in front of me.
Yeah.
And I also don't know. Remember, Monsoon and Junior's father went way back.
Right.
I think if you talk to Junior today, he he wouldn't say that the times that when I worked there, that that was his company. It was his
Mhm.
father's company. When
Right.
WrestleMania 1 hit,
Yeah.
that I think is how he sees, or maybe 84. That's the beginning of WWE in his mind, because that's what he created.
Mhm. So let's jump forward over 40 years, and now we're in 2023, and the biggest story of the year is the fact that the WWE has been sold to this Endeavor company, and under this TKO Holdings umbrella. What was your reaction, and were you surprised by Vince, quote unquote, letting go of his baby and selling, or were you like, no, this is business. This is something Vince would do. Or were you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised.
No.
Look at his age. I mean, what I know that he thinks he's going to live forever, probably, but I mean, just realistically, and then also the bad PR that he's caused the company,
Mhm.
and I don't know. He probably looks at things like, oh man, the good old days, you could have just, like paid them off cheap and moved on. And
Yeah.
now they're holding me to account. We're not looking at a change, or this isn't something that's just developed. This is the
No.
way the guy's been, that's who he is.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know that he recognized that he began to be a liability to the company, but yeah, I mean, how how many years can you do it? I mean, and when I say do it, I mean lived it. Give him his due. He lives his business. There's not a moment in the day that he's not doing something, having to do. I mean, even when he's relaxing, he was thinking about his business. So, give him his due, in that. But no, I'm not surprised.
Go ahead, Tyler.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about a recent appearance a couple years ago we saw you do with AEW.
You remember that?
That was fantastic. I
It was
loved
kind of
it.
quick, you know?
It kind of it caught me off guard. All of a sudden, I saw you on TV. I
Caught
popped
me off
you.
guard too.
So how did this come to be, and what was your experience like with working with AEW?
Um, well, that was for a Wednesday Dynamite, and they didn't contact me until the weekend before. Um, I can only tell you what they told me. It was to conduct the weigh-ins for the John Moxley Chris Jericho match. So it was the pre-match weigh-ins. And to tell you the truth, with what I did, I don't know why Justin couldn't have done it, but I didn't understand the whole idea behind this. But when they contacted me, all they said was is that they wanted me to host a segment, and I said I don't host segments. You have to be very careful about what you do and how you present yourself. I'm the only one that's watching out for me. And the last thing I want to do, and the last memory that I want, because who knows, I mean, GMC may go down, in 5 minutes. So any of us could, right? So you don't want people's last memory of you to be a real big screw up. I mean, that was back when they were drawing like 1 million viewers. So sometimes it's better not to do anything than to say, oh, great, I'm going to be on TV. And, no. I'm beyond that. It's like, if it works for me, and I think there's a good possibility of a great outcome, I'll do it. And if, business wise things make sense, then that would be great. So when they called me and they said they wanted me to host a segment, it's like, I don't host segments. It's like, I'm not going out there and, falling on my face. But then I talked to Tony Khan on the phone, and I talked to, who else did I talk to? I talked to, one of his quote unquote lieutenants. I talked to Marshall. And then when they explained to me what they wanted, it was just that they wanted ring introductions to bring the guys to the ring for their weigh-in. It's like, oh, if that's what you mean by hosting a segment, then that's cool. Then, then that's fine. Then I can do that. I have a real quick story for you that has nothing to do with what your question is, if you want it.
Absolutely, we want it.
Always.
This goes back to WCW. This was a Clash of the Champions, and you'll see how it connects. There is some connection. It was Charleston, South Carolina. Coastal Crush, I think, was the name of the Clash. So I get to the arena in the afternoon. Jim Hurd was the executive vice president. He calls me over. That's never a good thing. The boss, it's just better to tiptoe around the boss, and so you can't say anything stupid, if you don't say anything. So he said, Gary, he said, I got something special for you tonight. I said, oh, great. Like, what is it? He said, we have a new guy coming in, and you're going to interview him live on this broadcast. Now, for the younger fans, the Clash of the Champions for WCW were specials that drew huge, humongous ratings on TBS.
Yeah.
And they were to set up the next pay-per-view. So he said, yeah, this guy, he's amazing. He's from Argentina, and he's like over 7 feet tall, he said. And what we want is he's going to, come into the ring, and you're going to interview him. You're going to introduce him to the audience. People have never seen him in this country before. I said, okay, that's fine. He said, there's only one thing. I said, okay. He doesn't speak English. I said, all right. So what language does he speak? Because, with them, you never could not. He said Spanish. I said, oh, that's fine. I'm bilingual. I can speak Spanish. So I'll ask him the question in Spanish, and I'll tell the folks at home what I'll translate his answer. He said, terrific, terrific, terrific. So I thought we were done with our conversation. As I turned away, he said, oh, one more thing. He said, yeah. He said, I sent the guy down to the Home Depot, and he picked up a 6-foot ladder, and you're going to interview him from the top of the ladder. I said, wait a minute. Wait a minute. My mind is working. First off, you never say to your boss no, and you never say bad idea. The boss never has a bad idea, but you have to work your way to that. Because I'm thinking to myself, oh, great, live television, millions and millions of people, aluminum ladder on an unsteady ring, climbing to the top, working with someone who's never been on TV before and has never walked in, has never been on TV in a ring, has never wrestled before. So I'm saying to myself, this is not good. this is, and as I said before, if I don't take care of myself, no one else is going to. So I said, oh, okay. Notice I didn't say no. I said, okay. I said, but here's an idea though for you. I understand like what you're trying to accomplish, but maybe because I'm so short and he's over 7 foot, that maybe it would be more impressive if we were both standing on the mat and I was on my tippy toes holding the mic stretched all the way out, and people looking at that visual, I think, might work better. And he went with it. He went with just why you never saw the aluminum ladder in Charleston, South Carolina. So sometimes, you just have to look out for yourself.
Yeah.
And now, how did that connect? Now I got so far astray. I don't know how. What was I telling you about before that?
Your AEW appearance.
Oh, right. So that's why I originally, I told them I don't really think this is going to work out because this isn't what I do. And then I think what had happened was Chris Jericho had said we need someone with a big voice, and I don't know why they brought me in. Maybe just because I'm more of an old school announcer, but Justin booms. So that was why. And when I went, I had no problem. It was great to see some of the fellows I had worked with in the past.
Yeah, that was cool. That's what I assumed why they brought you in. I think there's a
and they needed someone to make fun of.
There's this. I mean, you have this program that is on TBS, and you have guys like Arn Anderson working for the company and other old school wrestling figures. To me, it's a no-brainer to bring a Gary Michael Cappetta into a company and to a show like that, because I think a lot of people who may have been out of wrestling for a while, older fans that watch the early days of WCW, are maybe watching AEW because they get to see some of their favorites like Sting, like Arn, like Jake Roberts on television, which is kind of cool. So
well,
to see Gary,
just from the announcing side, you've got Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. Those are the guys I worked with.
Yeah, which is a great throwback. So I think that is one thing. Tony Khan comes in a little. People might make fun of a bit for bringing in these old school guys, but I think it works for a certain demographic, and it's worked for him for a while anyway. So I don't think people should be judging him too harshly for that.
I think that we should start the petition to get Mr. Capetta to be the ring announcer for Sting's last match. I would love to hear one more. This is Sting. That's just me being a fan, though. I don't know.
No, I love that. Before I let Tyler start to take us home, I do have a fun question that was sent to us by one of our correspondents, Adam Colton. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about this because this is kind of cool. Adam would like to know, can you tell us about working with the Legends of Wrestling video game series?
Hmm.
Was it something you enjoyed, and would you consider doing more voiceover work in the future?
I loved it. It was fun to do. Um, I did it over the course of 2 weekends. Um, Once in, I think, Kansas City, and definitely the second time in Austin, Texas. So totally different studios. I did quite a bit of voiceover work back in the day. But one thing that they didn't take into consideration is, when you do those, well, when we did this one, I don't know how they're done today, if they're done differently. But I go into the studio, and there's a small screen, and um, there's two lights on top. One was green, one was red. Green, you talk. Red, you stop. So go, stop, go, stop. And continually flashing on the screen, you would do all the cities at one time. You would do all the wrestling names at one time. You would do all the weights at one time, but you would do it one after another. So, in other words, and I'm watching, and I'm reading. So, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Toronto, Canada. So, and you had to do it with a voice inflection so that when they piece it together with the rest of the introduction, it sounds right. So your tone had to be the same. New York City, New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But because I boom, that's my style. You can't do what I just illustrated to you for 10 hours in a day, because you will do what happened to me. You lose your voice. You're what I did, it wasn't constant, and I only would do like 6, 7 matches a night, and then my voice would rest for 24 hours. Well, you can't do my style of announcing for that many consecutive hours. So that was not cool, to lose your voice in the middle of this. So, one day we had to give it a rest, and came back the next morning, and luckily my voice was back. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that.
Very
Absolutely.
cool.
I can relate. I can relate to that a lot, actually,
Well,
because
before you get into that, Tyler,
yeah.
I because that's kind of where I'm going. I want to ask one more question before I give it to you to take us home and ask your final questions. Because I was going to say, I know you're too humble to ask the question I'm about to ask, so I'm going to do it for you. And you're too humble to put yourself over. Mr. Capetta, my partner here, Tyler, in his own right, is a very talented ring announcer. He is the ring announcer for our local promotion, Barry Wrestling, and does a great job for us here. Has come into his own big time for this company. My question to you, what do you have to say to people like Tyler, people like correspondent Adam Conta, who works for Rock Solid Wrestling, people who want to always get better? That's one thing I love about Tyler. He's never content. He always wants to get better at his craft. He always wants every show to be a little bit better than the last one. What kind of advice do you have for ring announcers working in the indies or working their way up in this business that want to continuously get better at their craft?
Well, the number one thing is to do it as much as you can. I mean, the more experience you have in working in front of a crowd, which is very different from working in front of a mirror, it is only going to get you to be better at what you do. I think everybody starts, whether you be a wrestler or a referee or an announcer. There are certain, as you're a fan and you're growing up as a fan, there are certain figures, certain referees or wrestlers or announcers that you were drawn to, that you appreciated. And all of us start by like stealing a little bit from this one, from that one, and eventually you create your own wrestler, your own announcer, your own referee. Yeah, I mean, the number one thing is just to do it as often as possible. to understand that you're not the star, that you're a supporting player, to know what your role is and don't overstep that. Um, as an old school guy, to always respect what goes on in the ring. And when you're in the ring, the wrestlers are not your friends. They're, they're the reason that people are buying tickets to see the show. Fellow ring announcers, you are not the reason. so, yeah, I think that now, but as time goes on, things evolve, and evolution is a good thing. I don't believe that whether it be the wrestling or the announcing, that it should be the same as it was when I was coming through. But there are still certain principles that need to be upheld. And it's treating um, the reality of wrestling, the art of wrestling with a certain amount of seriousness. And that's only going to elevate the sport and you in addition to that. One of the reasons that I've had such a lengthy career in pro wrestling is because of the fans. And I was amazed when I did the AEW appearance. That was in, I think, Kansas City, that people even remembered what I did, or because it had been a while since I'd been on national TV, and so that was. But I keep connected with fans on social media. I do conventions. I still go out and do guest ring announce appearances. So yeah, but you you never you can never lose. And I don't think that reverence is too high of a word for what goes on in the ring. Everything needs to be based on reality, not just the wrestling, but you, the ring announcer, and everything that goes on around. Now, here's something that it's just a spur of the moment kind of thing. One thing that does bother me is because everybody's so smart, everybody can predict what's going to happen next. So what bothers me is when I watch, whether it's AEW or WWE, the ring announcer, just from the ring announcer's point of view, cowering in the corner. So you say to yourself, well, why is he doing that? Like, we never did that before. Well, he's doing that because, and notice I use the word cower because I want to portray this as negative, because we know that the wrestler is going to come in, he's going to take center stage, or she's going to take center stage and address the hard camera. Fine, but I think that the ring announcer should start in the middle and then get out of the way. I don't agree. There's so many things that are done because, well, we know this is going to happen, so we're going to do that, and we know that's going to happen. But not all of the fans know that. Not all of the fans can anticipate everything. So I don't. I think that ring announcers need to be more independent with their movements, and I think it makes it more realistic. Yeah, I'm going to get out of the way, because if I don't get out of the way, then I'm going to get bowled over. But I'm not going to start by cowering in the corner. I don't know. I just don't like the look.
Interesting. I that's definitely something interesting to think about. Because I know that's something that I've been guilty of doing myself, is I've cowered in the corner. I try to react to the heels instead of, like if they come towards me, I cower. I won't just cower for the sake of,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
I want to help them. You know what I mean? Like for
Yes.
me, if they come up to me and I don't move, then it makes them look weak, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, when I was with WWF, I made a career of being used as a prop. I was a prop for not only for the villains, but also when when the face would come in and he'd pat me on the back and shake my hand. Well, the message that's going to the second row is, wow, that Bruno Sammartino, that Pedro Morales, that Bob Backlund, he's a real nice guy. See, but they're using me to send that message. How simple. How simple.
Absolutely.
At the same time, when a Morocco or like a George Steele or a Bob Orton or superstar Billy Graham, when they would come in and sneer at me and just not try to walk through me because I would obviously move out of the way, they're sending a message to the second row. Like, that's not, look what he's doing to Gary. Gary's our ring announcer, you know? And so my job was to be John Q. Public. I was everybody's friend. Everyone should have been able to relate to me, so that no matter what happened around me, people received a message and felt it personally. Because that's our ring announcer.
Something and I really admire the work that you do. You're actually somebody that I really look up to, and I study a lot of your movements, and I will never try to duplicate your announcing because you have your own style, and I don't want to be the next you because I could never do that. So I have my own style when I speak. But something that I do study a lot of you is your mannerisms and your movements and your reactions, and that I really respect is that you had the credibility with the audience. When there's been situations that you've been put in where, for instance, when you had to announce that Ric Flair had to vacate the world championship and you were in that position, people respected that because you built that relationship with them. And I had to do a similar situation with our champion and Barry, where we vacated the title, and people resonated with that because they see the love that I have for them as fans as well. So that's something that I've really taken from you as well.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from or when it started or with whom it started. Whenever I see something that doesn't sit well with me on AEW or WWE, I really get alarmed because that communicates to all of future announcers that it's okay to do something that I just cringed at. And it takes like 10 years for it to cycle out, for people to stop doing what makes me cringe. I was at an indie show. Here's an example of something that the promoter just never thought about it. So the ring announcer comes. First off, I don't know. Well, the ring announcer comes down the ramp, gets into the ring, introduces the participants, gets out of the ring, but doesn't sit at ringside. And he goes up the ramp and disappears. So the match goes on. The match ends. The bell, you hear, bell rings. Then you hear the ring announcer announce the winner. I'm sitting there saying, how does he know who won?
Yeah.
All he did was hear, how does he know whose shoulders? Don't tell me that there's a monitor in the back. I'm a wrestling fan. I don't see that. Don't tell me that he's leaning against a corner wall. Don't tell me that he's sitting next to the sound guy. He should be at ringside.
100%.
He should be at ringside to do his job whenever it's necessary. But no, all of a sudden, some of these ring announcers in the indies are stars. So I guess they need the grand entrance in between every match.
Oh.
And when you're sitting at ringside, oh, this is you just wound me up. This is one that really, really pisses me off. You need, as an announcer, as a timekeeper, as any official at ringside, you pay attention to what's going on in the ring, and you react to it as any fan would. Take your phone out and look at your phone. Oh my, that's undermining what's going on in the ring. That's sending a message that whatever the hell's going on in the ring, that's not important. Because my messages, they're much more important than anything. So
I'd love to
I have a
ask you
lot
a
of pet
question
peeves
that
about
relates to
them.
that as well then. Something that I do on occasion for the bigger matches, and I'd love to take your take on this, if this is good or bad, I guess. Once the match picks up, and I only do this for certain matches that are a little bit more of importance, I guess. If there are really close near falls, I will kind of react thinking that it's over, and I'm not ring side, I'm back a little bit, so I'm not in view of too many people, but I'll like kind of put my microphone up like, oh my God, did he get him? And I'm like trying to show I'm invested in the match. Is that good or bad, or what's your take on something
That's
like that?
a good thing. It's good. Well, do you know, you don't know the finishes, do you? In
I do know
advance?
I do know the finishes
Okay,
beforehand
because I never
because
did. And I never would want to. But yeah, there's anything that you can add to the reality of what's going on is a positive thing.
that's perfect. That's perfect. I would I've really just been honored to get this advice from you. Like I said, you're definitely one of the people that I've looked up to. You're one of my favorite ring announcers of all time. Growing up watching wrestling, I'm 39 years old. I've watched wrestling for my entire life. And Mike said this best when we interviewed Bill Apter. I never wanted to be Hulk Hogan. I never wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to be Gary Michael Cappetta. I wanted to be Howard Finkel. Mike wanted to be Bill Apter. Like that's the side of the business that we love. And something else I love that you did, and I'll ask you maybe just a couple more questions here. I know you've been great with our time. You were very good at giving distinct entrances to certain wrestlers. Some of my personal favorites, obviously we talked about Sting, the Great Muta. I loved how you introduced him as the Pearl of the Orient, Flying Brian. Is that something that you just kind of felt with the characters? Like how did you develop giving these unique entrances to each individual?
Um, just whatever sounded right. And it wasn't necessarily the first time that I introduced them isn't necessarily what the introduction wound up later that you remember. So if you watch the early Sting matches, you probably didn't hear "This Is Sting." You probably didn't hear "Pearl of the Orient," and I just came to those announcements. But here's the important part. The important part is once you got it, once you're comfortable with it, once you see that it works, you do it the same way each and every time. That's why you remember it. That's why, for instance, the nighttime talk shows and for decades, couch, desk, interviewer behind the desk, the interviewee, the bands on the side, that's never changed because it works. And so if it works, you just use it. You make it your own. You there was you remember, he's Canadian. Remember Trucker Norm?
I don't know Trucker Norm actually. That
No.
one.
Yeah, you know Trucker Norm. Let me think of one of his other, Norman the Lunatic.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So when he came back as Trucker Norm, we're in the afternoon production meeting, and Dusty Rhodes is conducting the meeting, and so he's telling us about Trucker Norm, and so I want to be sure I get Dusty's vision, and so I said, Dust, I said, where should I announce him as being from? He said, I don't care, just like whatever you want. So I said, oh, okay. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's a trucker and he's all over. So I just made up from the highways and byways of America. So, from the highways and byways of America, weighing 304 pounds, whatever it was. Because it just worked. It just seemed right for him. Um, so it just depends.
Yeah.
Sting was a matter of the word sting is a closed vocal, and it's very difficult to boom it because your throat closes.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed a running start to get there. So that's why I created "This Is," and then I went for it, and it didn't always come out the right way, but
Yeah.
When you boom Sting, it's either going to work or it's not.
Did you have a personal favorite announcement, like someone that you really enjoyed doing?
Not really. I enjoyed it. There wasn't anything that I didn't enjoy.
That's fair. You've been so great with your time, and I'm gonna wrap up the interview here. I always like to end every interview with the same question. You've done so many incredible things. You've been all over the world, both inside the ring, outside the ring, behind the scenes. Is there any moments that you look back on and it just makes you personally smile, or something really cool that you did that just makes you happy that you got to do?
Announcing at Royal Albert Hall in London, that was a high. That was, and then a lot of the firsts. The first time I announced in a 20,000 seat arena. That's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. The first time I did TV, the first time I stepped into a ring, I couldn't figure out how to get in the ring. I didn't know
Yeah.
whether to go through the top two ropes or the bottom. I wasn't going to vault over the top, so, um, and that's what started my connection with the fans that were there that night, because they saw what a goof I was. And it's like, he doesn't even know how to get in the ring. Oh my God, this
I,
is going to be a long night.
I tripped walking up the stairs on my first show. first
Yes,
first time getting in the ring, and right
yes.
from there, which
We've all tripped, tripped it. It's how you handle it. It's, how you can, if possible, how you can use it.
Mhm.
So a lot of the firsts, I knew when I did the three Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair matches, um, that they were important. I guess it was at Chicago, Nashville, and New Orleans. When Bruno came back for his belt against superstar Billy Graham, there were three sold out shows in Philadelphia. 19,500 people each time. The initial match and then the two rematches. Those were special. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been blessed that I've had so many experiences over different, um, announcing tens of thousands of wrestlers. I had the statistics, which I don't know off the top of my head, of how many wrestlers I introduced and how many bouts and how many cities. And when you're doing it, you don't realize what you're compiling, but it's really cool. And I just thank the Lord for that opportunity, and I thank the fans for continuing to support GMC. I mean, I really, um, it's not me, it's circumstances and the people around me that have enabled me to have a really amazing, when I say amazing career, I mean, like, I'm amazed, every time I have a new opportunity.
I'm absolutely amazed with this conversation that we've had today. It was such an honor to get any type of advice from somebody that I admire so much, and that I've looked up to. And, for me to have my baby toe dipped in this industry, to be able to ring announce, and, to get the advice from one of my heroes that I looked up to, it really means more than I can put into words. So I can't thank you enough for that, Mr. Capetta.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you guys.
And
Thanks.
on behalf of Mike, whose computer froze and we lost him, unfortunately, I just got the message there. I can't thank you again, Mr. Gary Michael Cappetta. And on behalf of Mike, you have been counted out.